Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, it's Ivy Slater, and welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. Today's guest is Kiwi Callahan. She is head of video production at Delphi Strategic Marketing and Design. Kiwi is a documentary filmmaker, martial artist, wine lover. This is where we have things in common. And a seriously heavy sleeper, definitely not in common. But she truly wasn't always that way. Kiwi found her way into documentary filmmaker after being a professional musical theater actress for 10 years. As she grew older, she found herself becoming more confident in her beliefs, less sure she knew everything, and drawn to the different kind of story. After much consideration, and she says, well, consideration being she'd read some, paced some, had some wine, did a little sleeping, definitely ate some chocolate, she decided to change directions and pursue a career in documentary filmmaking. In addition to documentary films, Kiwi has also been in the productions and worked on a variety of larger brands, from everything from the solopreneurs to international brands of Dockers, Targets, and Dove. Today, Kiwi is coming to us as a brand new a mother of an adopted rescue pup and documentary filmmaker. And my first question is, Kiwi, welcome. And are we making a documentary of the pup?
We totally should. Meg, she's got a really great story, so I think she'd make an excellent protagonist.
There we go. So welcome. Thanks for joining me on Her Success Story.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, we always think about actors and actresses having, a variety of different jobs, because only a select few have that consistent work. So share with us a little bit of that background of what you did before you started actually creating your own films.
Yeah, definitely. I did have some like some of the odd jobs that actors are known for. A friend of mine has probably the most impressive list of crazy jobs. Like, flexibility was always her priority. So she did things like grave finding for genealogists and like all kinds of random stuff. I went the more traditional route, and I was a waitress. So I worked in restaurants for about 15 years. And then that did allow me a lot of flexibility, when I needed to leave and go travel for a show, or if I needed to go travel for do a tour. There was always, especially being in larger cities, I lived in Chicago and also in New York, someone's always hiring once you have the experience. So that became a very good way to kind of be stable and always be able to pay the bills while also being able to pursue the other stuff.
So how did you, when was that time that all of a sudden you said, okay, I'm done? And I refer to it, as I talk about the journey of success, not to success, because I always feel once we reach success, we're over. And I'm not ready to be over. But I remember, the day, I could tell you the moment, the day in April of 2007, when I crashed and burned, and I said, I might still be a printer tomorrow, but I need to make a change. Being an actress and a musical theater, you're surrounded by community, you're surrounded by people. What was that moment or day that you realized you were ready to transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it was, I feel grateful to be able to say that I actually had a good level of success. I did a national tour. I had an agent. I was starting to get, really tiny TV gigs. I was starting to be called in for Broadway stuff. So I wasn't booking it yet, but they knew who I was, and it was getting there. So it was kind of I had wanted to be a musical theater actress from the time I was probably 8 years old. I remember that moment too, when I decided, I saw my first musical on stage and I was like, that is what I want to do. And so it was like you have this picture in your mind of what your life is going to look like, and you're kind of and what success looks like. And it wasn't until I reached a certain level of success and I was like, oh, this is what the road actually looks like. This is going to be my life, And I was looking down that road and I was like, oh no, I don't want this. And that was, honestly kind of devastating, because like I had been so long working toward it, and I had invested so much, and I went to college for it, and I'd been waking up early for auditions and taking dance classes and voice lessons. It's just like you put so much work into this thing, and then when you stop loving it, it's like, well, dang, now what do I do?
So when actually the love of your career becomes just that day job.
Yeah. And so I started wondering, like, I started the process by thinking like, okay, maybe, I'm just not heading in the right direction in with acting. Like, so I did things like I took improv classes and like tried to get outside of the musical theater space. I tried to do some more like film stuff, and like go out for more TV stuff, and even being an extra so that I could see how the sets work. And so it was like in that exploration of like theater related things and film related things that I started to really notice like everything outside of the actor sphere, like what else was going on set. And it was, I'll cut through that whole process because it was kind of a lot, but basically I started making little videos just for fun, and I really fell in love with that type of storytelling. And so I started exploring that further. And it just sort of grew kind of organically out of that exploration. And pretty quickly I realized that what I was missing was I still felt like a storyteller, but I wasn't telling the stories that I wanted to, I wasn't. And when you're an actress, everything you're doing is scripted. And so like, if you really love the craft of acting, like the spontaneity that comes out of scene play is enough. But for me, I really wanted to be like in the action. Like I wanted new things to be happening to me. I wanted to be out in the world. I wanted to be like in the middle of it all. And I felt like with acting, that wasn't the feeling that I had. And so I started to realize that when I went into acting, what I was picturing was not a career in acting. It was a particular like way of life. And I was able to actually realize that way of life through documentary filmmaking rather than acting. So I'm really grateful that I was able to, have support from really fantastic people during that process, because it was not easy. But I feel so happy now and so satisfied now that I've been able to, change that direction and realize that life that was in my head all along, that I was able to get there in the end. And obviously it's still a work in progress, but.
Well, yeah, and everything is a work in progress.
Right.
And I have to say, there's a big growth that goes from, documentary filmmaking sounds like, oh, so, Kiwi transferred art forms, but it's still in the arts, and it is in the arts. But the difference is if you're making documentary films, there's a business side to that.
Totally.
And you stepped into actually stepping into, how did that transcend into stepping into being a businesswoman? And if it's, finding projects, raising capital, who's paying you, how did that transfer over?
Yeah, totally. So the way it started for me was my husband was also an actor, and he transitioned out for different reasons a little earlier than me. And so he had started his business, which is now Delphi Strategic Marketing and Design, which is where
you're now in business together.
Yes. So we're now in business together. So his business, the business that we now are in business together, started with just him and his laptop in the living room. And now we have a team of 10 people, but in the beginning it was just him, and then it was the two of us. And so we started realizing that like all of his clients, needed video as part of their marketing strategy. And so a way for me, it kind of was like a perfect, like like meeting of the minds a little bit, because like it was a way for me to practice my craft, you know, with every client taught me something new. Every client had a new request that was like, can you do this? And and my strategy was basically like, sure I can. And then I'd go straight to YouTube and look it up and be like, I hope somebody has a tutorial for this. You know, and you know, no, YouTube still hasn't failed me. I should probably knock on wood. You know, and then slowly I was also able to develop a network of people that I could ask. And like, so, but like it really, so it kind of started with that. So like in being able, that was sort of a way for me to now pay the bills with my craft, which is super awesome coming from acting background. And then also be able to like expand out and work on personal projects without worrying so much about like, where's the money coming from? You know, especially at the beginning, it's so hard to like get people to trust you as a filmmaker until you have a little bit of a portfolio. So that I was actually able to build my portfolio pretty quickly because I had this like built-in pipeline of clients already. It was great.
And, you know, and just kind of getting a point in reference, because we're talking today, video is like mandatory for brands. But
Totally.
This was a while back.
Yeah, this was about 8 years ago.
Yeah. And that's where, you know, it was just starting to, you know, not everybody, we didn't all have iPhones. We were making videos, putting them up on LinkedIn and Instagram and, you know, building brand video, you know, that whole thing. So it was
the first video that I shot and edited was on my iPhone 3G. You know, so like, yeah, totally. That's exactly where we were.
So, you know, today as an artist, as a business leader, you've worked with big brands, you've worked with, you know, the smaller companies. What do you see as the differentiator as a businesswoman? Or is there?
Like between working with smaller brands and larger brands, you mean?
Correct.
That's a great question. I don't think there's not too much that's really different. You know, the clients these days, regardless of their size, have a lot of the same goals when it comes to video. It's about really clearly communicating your message on like and formatting it in the way that is best for whatever medium. So like an intro video that lives on your website is going to be a different structure than, you know, a 40-second sizzle reel that you're sending out on Instagram, or a 15-second Facebook ad, or so all of those. I think the real differentiator between clients is what they're using it for and what the goal is, what the end goal is with the video. Like, what are we trying to accomplish with this piece in terms of your marketing goals? Because like really between big and small clients, like you would think it would be budget, but honestly, like some of my, you know, the size of the client, the size of the company doesn't always dictate how much funding there is to work on it, especially if it's like a new initiative. It might be like one person inside a company who got the go ahead to like try something new. And so they might have a very minimal budget, you know, like, whereas like, you know, some smaller person who's just starting up might have fundraised or received a grant with a large lump sum. Some of my nonprofits are some of my most lucrative clients, you know? So like, it just kind of, it all really depends on where they're at in their process and like what it is that they're trying to shoot. Because like a TV commercial, it's pretty hard to shoot a TV commercial for, you know, a really tiny budget. You need a lot of people to make that look good, you know. But like with something that's going to live on Facebook, it's not necessarily the budget doesn't have to be astronomical to make something really compelling and great.
So how do you guide your clients as far as video and branding these days? Because there's and, you know, listeners, I've said it before, and I hope you believe me, because I don't prep my guests. We just have a conversation. So Kiwi did not have these questions. So when you hear her taking a deep breath, she's really giving thought to, you know, giving true insight and not canned answers here.
Thanks. Yes. Apologies in advance for any awkward silences. You know,
but you know, video is so strong out there, and we're shooting, videos on our laptops, we're shooting videos on our phones, we're shooting videos, on our phones stuck to the middle of a ring light, and then we're hiring professionals. So how are you guiding your clients as far as how we should be making decisions? Because not all videos, what I heard you answering is not all videos should be on your phone and your computer, yet it's a good place to be doing it.
Yeah, 100%. I would say, the first thing I would say, because I've definitely had this question a lot from a lot of clients, is like the first thing people always ask me is like they're just terrified of the budget, because video production has a reputation for just being astronomically expensive, right? Like we always think of Super Bowl commercials when we think of ads, but if you really stop to look at the Facebook ads that are in your feed, like next time you're scrolling through Facebook, a lot of those little videos are like not even filmed. They're a series of still images with animated text, or sometimes it's like the influencer video where they will have filmed themselves on their phone giving a testimonial, and like they'll cut it together into like something a little snappy with some product photos, but like it doesn't always have to be complicated. So that's the first thing I always want to tell people, is just that like it's better to have it and have it be simple than to not have it and shy away from it because you think it has to be expensive. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is that, cell phone video, first of all, I literally last week shot a commercial for a cell phone that can shoot in 8K. Which means,
what does that mean?
Yeah, the picture that cell phone can produce, you could blow it up on an IMAX screen without a problem. So like cell phones make great videos. So I would not, so don't disregard the power of the tool that is in your pocket currently. YouTube empires have been built with cell phones, but, and there are times when a cell phone video is more appropriate for the setting. Like one thing that I've done, one of my clients, and this kind of is an interesting shift that happened with the pandemic too, is that, at the beginning of 2020, my entire shoot slate was wiped completely clean.
True.
And I'm really grateful that I also know how to edit, because then my year was filled with editing. But, essentially everyone pivoted, including some really large clients that I have, like international brands, pivoted to producing everything on cell phones with at-home shoots. So like that bar of like everything that goes out must be shot on a really fancy camera is now non-existent. Like we might get back there eventually, but I think cell phone footage is part of our kind of storytelling vocabulary now. I think that's just how things are going to be. And so like when you're filming something for social, if you want it to look like one of your super fan customers just tried this product and really loves it, like honestly, it would look more genuine if it was filmed with a cell phone. Like if that's the message that you want to send, that our fans love our product so much that they film themselves giving testimonials, no one's going to believe that testimonial was self-taped if you shot it on a giant cinematic camera with perfect lighting and the background's amazing and it just looks like produced, so if you think about your messaging, like there are times when cell phone and Zoom and all of that stuff makes more sense depending on the story you're trying to tell. So I would say, just when you're looking at what you're trying to produce, the camera is a tool to execute your vision. Whether that's a cell phone camera, whether that's a cinematic camera, whether that's a documentary camera or a news camera, they all have different applications, but your vision for what you want to communicate is the most important thing. So don't let the tool hold you back from producing something that could communicate your message.
So, you brought up, last year, pandemic. I remember we were, I don't know, having wine or something a couple of years ago, and you were hitting the road for like months and months on end doing a major documentary. Mm-hmm. With the transition last year of truly remote, virtual, how did you transform as a filmmaker?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I appreciate now having multiple skills. Like before, I always was like, I do genuinely believe that I'm a better camera operator because I know how to edit, and I'm a better editor because I know what the camera person is trying to communicate when I see footage. So that's great, but also having, like other skills, like being able to creatively think about how to use what's in front of you as opposed to just lamenting that it's not what you wish it was. you know like someone hands me a really low res Zoom thing, but they want to make a compelling Facebook ad. Like, how can we make that footage work? And I feel like now I've definitely, like, it was sort of always part of my philosophy that like nothing is unusable. And I think that's a very sort of documentary perspective on things, is that like documentary filmmakers aren't always dealing with high quality, beautifully shot, perfectly controlled footage, right? Like, we're in the middle of the action and we're darn lucky if our camera catches what it's supposed to catch. But like, or you're dealing with archival footage or stuff that you pull from Twitter. Like, it's not necessarily always like a perfectly on location, well lit, fully staffed shoot for anything. And so, but that really has become a core belief of mine now, is that like, it doesn't matter what you have, it is usable. It can be used. It can be made to work somehow. And I think that, I'm really grateful for that learning, because I think that will continue to carry me through a lot of different types of productions.
So what do you see? The world is slowly starting to open up little bits, a little more outdoors, more, and it's not happening tomorrow. So for business, for you, what are you doing today as far as leading your piece of business forward, your stake in the marketplace?
I think more than anything else, I'm working on staying organized. That is, I would say, going to be super clutch going forward for us, because we've kind of gotten into this whole routine of like everything happens from home and everything happens remotely, and like there's always time for a little thing in between phone calls or whatever. Like if someone needs a last minute change to a video I sent before it goes out on social, it's really easy for me to just like, quickly change that and re-export. But now that we're starting to reintroduce shooting, if I'm away from my desk all day, I can't do that anymore. So staying organized, keeping my clients updated as to like what my schedule is, being really transparent about what I'm able to do and not do, and like really making sure that my deadlines are actually achievable so that I don't like set myself up for failure, which is hard because, I'm a yes person. I like to say yes to people. And like, it's really hard for me to be like, I can't get that to you next week. I'm going to have to disappoint you right now. Like, that sucks. But it's better to tell them now than to have them be disappointed when I don't get it. Maybe I already told their team that it's achievable. So like, I get that it has to be done. So I would say, going forward, we're looking at organization. We're looking at reaching back out to things that, were put on hold to try to get them back on the calendar. We are, it's kind of the first, like the last, month or two have really been the first time that we've actually started to look to the future with any kind of like excitement whatsoever, which is kind of a great feeling. So I think that's about where we're at.
It is a really great feeling. And I know some clients that I used to see in person, and some different, roundtables that used to be in person and then partially in person, partially virtual, just the talk and the excitement of potentially, as the weather gets nice in the Northeast here, where we're located, of, gee, we could meet and do something outside, and, and the excitement, and everybody, like, you see everybody like sit up straight and lean right into Zoom. It's like, oh, we can. Yes. And it's, I think it's rejuvenating, a resurgence of excitement about our work again. That is really, I'm looking forward to, because I see it reflected in the people I work with.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Also, the warmer weather really helps a lot too. Not gonna lie. Like, oh my God, like just being able to stay outside for a little while and not have it be like just bitingly cold or raining or snowing. It's just like, yeah.
So, tips, thoughts on for our listeners today is, you've transcended and transformed yourself a variety of times.
Yeah, that is true.
So, for other people who are listening out there, thinking about as we're growing and scaling, we have so many opportunities to transform. And it doesn't mean you change industries every time you do that. Sometimes it's just adjustments within your own business. Any thoughts and tips around that?
Yeah, I would say the thing I think that was really the most helpful for me was like just being, so I just talked about how sometimes you have to say no, but also I think learning how to just say yes and learning from whatever happens. So like I think going back to acting, I think one of the best skills that they did teach us was how to say yes. Like if you've ever taken an improvisation acting class, they always tell you just say yes. So whatever your scene partner does, you agree with them and you take it one step further. So you say yes and is the thing. So like if someone says, I'm pointing a gun at you, you don't say that's not a gun and try to take the scene in a different direction. You say, oh my gosh, is that a flag coming out the front though? Isn't that a more you take it, you say, yes, I see your gun and I'm going to one up you by doing this. And then they will say, yes, it is. That's the Armenian flag because I'm from Armenia. And then so then you build a scene on yes. So it also kind of becomes a life philosophy too, because your job as an actor is really to, you take the gigs that come at you, and that's kind of a double-edged sword, but like, you say yes to the gig that comes through the door. And so I think when I switched to filmmaking, that was still my approach. And I learned so much from clients that I just said yes to, and like, didn't try to talk myself out of it. I was like, that's not enough money, but like, I don't really have a portfolio, so I'm just going to say yes and we'll see what happens. Or just like someone asked me to shoot something that I had never shot before, and I would say yes, and then go look up every possible YouTube video that I could about what shooting that might be like. Or I would edit something, and then a client would be like, can you do this effect? And I would say yes, and go find a YouTube tutorial or ask a friend or whatever. So trying to be open to those new experiences and trying to be open to what resources are available to you and like what you will learn by just diving into stuff, I think really helped accelerate that transition a lot.
I happen to think that's huge, and it's so true. And there was something that was called a while ago a year of yes. And it, back in the day as a printer, I was approached with the project and they said, well, for the binding, we'd like to use X, Y, and Z, this fabric out of Germany. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we weren't binding a book. We were binding a pocket folder.
Oh gosh.
And I'm like, and I said, wow, that's interesting. And, they're like, can we do it? I'm like, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
And it was, I didn't say yes because I truly wasn't sure, but I didn't say no. And it shows up with an approach of what can we, and I'm going to share something in a minute, but it shows up with that what can I do trait that is in the 7 traits of great leaders.
Yes, so, totally.
So I'm going to out this here for a second. So for all of you who want to see Kiwi's work, you could go to slatersuccess.com and take a look at a video that's called the 7 traits of great leaders. And, truly I think one thing we didn't do that day, or maybe you did, is we didn't take a photo of the actual cubby hole we shot this video in that looked like a beautiful studio with plants and lights. And it was basically a glorified cubbyhole. And it brought out, that was the day that I truly saw Kiwi's expansion and talent. Because,
thanks.
Oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? And nothing worked. And then we had these terrible, and watch the video, listeners, and then understand when it looks like I'm presenting, I'm sitting on the floor, Indian style in a tiny area.
Yep, and we were bouncing the light that's shining off on her face. The space was too small to move the lights very far away from her face, which would have cast really, really harsh shadows on her face.
It was too small to move the lights anywhere.
So instead of, so what I decided to do instead was to turn the light away from her and bounce it off the wall to cut some of the intensity and soften it a little bit. So she's got this nice, soft, beautiful wash of light over her face. And then the plants in the background. So she's sitting on the floor. The plants in the background are on little tiny coffee tables. They're little tiny plants, but they look like they're office plants. So perspective and focal length are everything.
Yeah, and I have to say that's the difference of working with a professional, because that couldn't have been that home video.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because again, you do need certain tools to achieve a certain look.
Right. Kiwi, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you so much. This has been super fun.
It has been super fun. How could after our guests are totally enamored with 7 Tips of Great Leaders on SlaterSuccess.com, how can they find out more about you, follow you, and see more of your work?
Yes. Okay. So you can check out our website at www.workwithdelphi.com. That's work with, and then Delphi is spelled Delphi. So workwithdelphi.com, like the Greek letter. And then you can follow us on social. Our handle is just Hey Delphi on everything. And
they do some great social. You guys really, really do some great social.
Thanks. Yeah, our design team and Megan, our head of social media, they are rock stars. I don't know how they keep doing it every week. It's great. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of our Instagram feed too. Not gonna lie.
So follow Kiwi, and most importantly, listeners, of course, I always say hit subscribe. We come in with new interviews and content every Monday morning. And as important, if not more important than that, after listening to the interview today, let us know what your biggest impact was, what your takeaway was today, and wait for it, what you're going to action, what's the action you're going to take now that you heard it? Because it's not just about sitting and listening to podcasts. It's not sitting and listening and reading a ton of content, whether you're on Clubhouse or Instagram or podcasts or YouTube. There's a ton of great stuff out there, and we're glad to be contributors to it. What the biggest piece for me is that to help people drive to action for themselves. Love that. Thanks for joining us here today, and see you next week on Her Success Story.